Hey everyone, namaste. And today I'm going to be doing a book sharing. It's going to be a summary, key points, ideas, takeaways of Mark Wolynn's book. It didn't start with you. How inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. And Mark Wolynn is the founder and director of the Family Constellation Institute. And I believe this book came out earlier in 2000, not even this year, 2017, pre-COVID definitely. And it's already in its, I want to say, more than 10th printing. It's like an amazing amount of printing, like in the tens, maybe even 30 printing, something like that. And of course, it's been translated into 30 languages. So if you speak a different language, please go ahead and find the translation and the translated book in your language. And it's recommended by giants in the meditation circle, Tara Brach and Sharon Salzberg. And I just want to remind everyone that I do paraphrase in this presentation for brevity to keep it concise. And this is a book presentation and not a substitute for professional and healthcare counsel. Okay, let's go to the next slide. There we go. So why read this book? So let's just go through these questions and consider these questions for yourself. Do you have phobias, fears, repeating behaviors around relationships, parents, friends, family, work, career, food, and diet that you just can't explain? Or do you self-sabotage in any of these areas? And do you hear yourself expressing a certain belief consistently? Like, do you hear a sentence over and over again in your head? Like, there's never enough. I'll always be alone. No one is there for me. Or something as crazy as I'll drown going near water, or I'll drown in a garden, or something that is just really outrageous to your logical mind. And yet it's going on repeat in your thoughts. And you've done all sorts of, maybe not therapy, all sorts of affirmations, you've done healing modalities, you've tried all sorts of different methods of healing, hypnosis, changing your thoughts, but you still can't change that belief, then it is very possible that you can find some sort of clarity from learning about inherited family trauma. I can't say it's going to be the fix, but I think just from my own experience, this work gives a lot of clarity to our subconscious, to our unconscious, so that we can better set our intentions for life. And so before we go into the bulk of the book, my suggestion, if you choose to work with it as we go, this work can take time to integrate. So if you do follow along the exercises, wait a couple of weeks before sharing with anyone. It really takes time for the brain to get on board. I'll just take myself as an example. I actually got this book all the way back in 2019. My first version, the first version I got was a hard copy. I've since donated to the library, and I have the soft copy now. But my first version was the hard copy, and it took me a long time. Like, I'm still working with it. It's been like 2019, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say a full 5 years. And it really takes time for the material to sink in, for you to really see where you can do the practices for maximum effect. for maximum efficacy. And it also takes time to open up to professional help, outside help, to learn the vocabulary, to start having that conversation, not only with outside help, but also within yourself. So basically, when I first started, I just want to bring your attention to this graphic here. So our mind is like an iceberg. When I started, we're up here in the conscious mind. We notice some things that are not quite right. We're noticing cause and effect, but we're noticing effect, but we're not really understanding the cause. I should put it that way, because most of it is in the subconscious mind. What we do, 90% is governed by the subconscious mind. So it takes time to really dig deep, to go further and to dive further and further into the unconscious. And so my suggestion is really to take your time with this material. Don't have to rush through. And also, as we uncover family traumas, it's easy for our natural defensive mechanisms to come up, as in, I knew it. It's all my dad's fault. It's all my mom's fault. It's all my grandfather's fault. It's all my sister's fault, blah, blah, blah. That's fight, right? And then you could be in flight, as in, oh my God, it's just, I can't deal with it. I'm just going to avert my eyes, avert my attention, and I won't touch it again. Or flight, as in, oh my God, it's just too much. I can't do this. And also, parts can be triggered. So evoke self-compassion to recognize emotions as they come up and not shun. And when I say parts, I'm referring to the internal family systems model. And this is a book by Richard Schwartz, also just very, very well known in the self-help positive psychology circle. And you can easily get this book in your local library, I believe. So I believe parts, if I remember correctly, are personalities that got separated and compartmentalized from the main personality when we had to face challenges and traumas. So we compartmentalize, or the different parts, personalities get separated in order for us to solve the issues, solve the challenges at that time. But then when they're not reintegrated into the main personality, the issue is when the parts get triggered, we become completely identified with the parts. So just the way to go really is to be able to come back to self-compassion, to be able to recognize the emotions if we do get triggered, so that we're not shunning the emotions that come up. And speaking of emotions that come up, it's also very potential that you can experience backdraft if there was the big T trauma in the past, as in it's something that you've maybe repressed into the subconscious, unconscious, suppressed without your conscious knowing. And then when we touch it with this work, something triggers and you go into some sort of reactivity and you can't calm yourself. In that case, I would actually back off. So with the fight, flight, freeze, I would actually, it's okay to feel like you need to just stay away and then perhaps turn to expert help before continuing with this. But those are really extreme cases. For anything that has to do with doing the work within yourself, I would stay in the challenge zone. So in the safe zone, we're not growing. We're not touching on the difficult parts within ourselves. We're not touching on the subconscious and unconscious. And we're not changing the impulses, the thoughts, the painful feelings that come up. So we want to be in the challenge zone where we touch on these challenges without going into overwhelm. So backdraft basically is being pushed into the overwhelm zone where we can no longer absorb the knowledge, we can't absorb, we can't process the information anymore. In that case, really get expert help. So if you're interested in self-compassion, I did a video on that. It's in the YouTube archive somewhere. And also read Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion. She has a bunch of resources out on the internet on her website regarding the practice of self-compassion. Self-compassion is a practice. And you are responsible for gauging where you are and your needs in the moment. So resources I just want to mention really quickly. Mark Wolynn has an interview with Tammy Simon on Sounds True podcast. You can just actually search for Mark Wolynn and Tammy Simon on Google. Or if you want to just type in the address, you could do that too. But you know, if you want just something really short to get a taste of what the book is about and what Mark Wolynn is about, I would definitely recommend it. It's just such a great interview. Of course, Tammy Simon, we all know, fantastic interviewer, love her work. So this podcast can really get you started. And then, of course, find your local therapist or family constellations expert and coach. They are around. Just search family constellations or family constellations coach, therapist on the internet, on Google Maps. You'll find them, or even internationally. You know, people do sessions by Zoom now. Just if you need help, please get help. All right, and also again, available on Amazon, so many languages. This book has won the Nautilus Book Award. So of course, it's gonna get translated into so many different languages, and thank God. You know, that's also why I'm doing this book report or book summary, is I really believe in the importance of this work. This book really changed my life in terms of how I am seeing my own behavior and how I'm seeing others' behavior. And it actually gives an out that's really practical. And I'll mention this later when we're done with the report, that it really allows us to start the healing journey. That's the point. You know, it's really, I would say the book is really useless if they just keep throwing you trauma, making you remember trauma after trauma, making you go through all these excruciating internal processes and then leaves you hanging. That makes no sense. But, you know, I think this is another reason why this book has been so popular and successful, is that it doesn't leave you hanging. It gives you concrete practices. It gives you a roadmap to walk the dark night of the soul, to walk the shadows, to walk the tunnels, but have simple instructions for you to keep moving forward towards the light. So find your language and buy the book. And so here we go. This is the first quote from the book. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And this is by Carl Jung. And very quickly, table of contents. Part 1, the web of family trauma. Part 2, the core language map. Part 3, pathways to reconnection. So part 1, we start to introduce what we mean by family trauma. Part 2, we want to start building our own story, our the core trauma that is affecting us the most. And then part 3, we start to go into reconciliation, reconnection, and healing. So I'll probably break this recording into 3 parts as well, so it doesn't drag on for 3 hours. I will try to be as succinct as possible. The main point really is to give you a flavor of what this book is about, so you can gauge for yourself if you want to read this book, or if you want to go to an expert, or how you want to use this book. And the page numbers that I reference, it's going to be at the bottom of the slide page. So this number is the number for my slides. At the bottom later, you'll see a page reference that refer to the Penguin paperback version. That's right, it is the 30th printing. So it's the paperback version numbers and not the hard copy. Just want to remind you of that. Okay, give me a minute. I'm gonna actually turn off the heater. So technology is great. My speaker, I know, is filtering out the sound of the heater, but I still hear it. And I know it does affect the recording a little bit, not by that much, but I just feel better when it's turned off. And of course, a little coffee break before we continue. So you know what? I'm gonna say this. So sometimes when we get into healing work, it gets really heavy. It just, like, the bottom of the stomach drops and we feel tense, and just we feel just a sense of seriousness. And I totally get it. What I would suggest is to try to bring in some sort of levity to it, in terms of exploring this material with a sense of curiosity. By the end of it, as I pick up sort of shadows of myself within the book, I see images of myself or reflections of myself in the book. I'm at a point where, I laugh. I find it so amusing. I'm coming to it from a sort of curiosity, and a sense of exploration, a sense of we're just journeying through life imperfect. We're just embracing this imperfection, as Brene Brown have said. It's just, and really having fun with it. So I'm probably not going to bring in this much humor with this presentation. But just to let you know, when you're going through this material, bring in some sort of levity. Again, not to say don't take life seriously, but have some sort of a gap from this, so that you're not identified and you don't go into anxiety that, oh my God, I'm so broken. Come from a place of, wow, it's great to know. It's giving me answers that I've always wanted. And I wonder what's going to happen after I do this work. So come in from just a sense of exploration. That's what I want to say. All right, part 1, the web of family trauma. Oops. So chapter 1 is traumas lost and found. So according to the professor of psychiatry and neuroscience at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York, Rachel Yehuda, found that people are 3 times more likely to experience symptoms of PTSD if one of your parents had PTSD. That is kind of like a no-brainer, right? Like they're just traumas and even conditions, physical conditions that can just run in the family. It doesn't really take science for us to get that intuitively. Um, and generational PTSD is inherited rather than from being exposed to stories. And children of Holocaust survivors who had PTSD were born with low cortisol levels, predisposing them to relive PTSD symptoms of the previous generation. And same for children of mothers who survived the 9/11 or the 9/11 attacks with PTSD. And traumas may not all be dramatic. Events such as death of parent, loss of home, withdrawal of mother's attention can all lead to expression of symptoms that are difficult to explain, like anxiety, physical symptoms, ideations, PTSD, etc. So basically, we're just saying that the big T traumas, such as Holocaust and 9/11, can, of course, uh, cause inherited trauma, but also the little T's where they're not big and dramatic. I would actually say death of parent is dramatic, but something like just not having your mother's attention for a short period while you're a baby and that wasn't resolved can actually bring about the small T trauma for a baby. So it just there's a range of traumas, and we're not trying to weigh them against each other. It's just they can all affect you quite equally. And inherited traumas can cause legacy of distress, but also forge a legacy of strength and resilience that can benefit generations to come. So the point is, if we're able to process these traumas, they become strength in your personality trait and can benefit generations to come. So chapter 2, 3 generations of shared family history, the family body. So genetically, you as the unfertilized egg already share a cellular environment with your mother and grandmother. So it's 3 generations sharing the same biological environment. As you can see in the graphics that I put together, let's say that this is your grandmother's womb, right? Then your mother would be in your grandmother's womb. And at that time, the egg that became you is actually already in your mother as a part of inside your grandmother's womb, sharing your grandmother's womb. So if you push this back several generations into previous generations, let's say that this is your grandmother. If the baby is your grandmother, then the womb is your great-grandmother, and your mother is already in your grandmother as a baby, sharing your great-grandmother's womb with your grandmother. So really, your great-grandmother can also affect you. And they say in family constellation that the events from 7 generations ago can still affect you. It goes back at least 7 generations. So this is very significant. And paternally, the precursor cells of the sperm that became you was already present when your father was in his mother's womb. So it's not just the female also. If this is your father in your grandmother's womb, the precursor cells that became you were already a part of your father inside the womb. So your mother was born with her lifetime supply of eggs that were formed in the grandmother's womb, whereas your father's sperms continues to be susceptible to traumatic imprints up to the point of conception. Of course, not to say that what happened later in your mother's life doesn't affect you as much as the father, not at all. It's just in terms of, we're talking about just sperm and the egg, that the sperm can continue to be susceptible to traumatic imprints, or imprints of what the father would be dealing with in life. So during conception, the mother can biochemically alter the genetic expression of her offspring through her emotions, fear, anger, love, through the release of hormones and nutrients into the bloodstream that feeds the fetus. And that's why it's really important for the mother to be in a balanced state during pregnancy, because the mother will release hormones, nutrients into the bloodstream that becomes the environment of the fetus. And my studies show that stressed mothers can deliver preterm babies, and bear daughters who also had shortened pregnancies, even when the daughter had not been stressed during gestation. And I find that really interesting. It's like, even when the daughter can be very balanced, very emotionally calm during pregnancy, but if her mother was stressed and deliver premature babies, then the daughter can also deliver premature babies, just through sort of this inherited trait. So this is mind-blowing to me, but it really answers a lot of questions. And trauma symptoms could be reversed in mice after living in a positive, low stress environment. Behaviors improve and they experience changes in DNA methylation, which prevented symptoms from being transmitted to the next generation. So there is hope, their traumas, or at least the symptoms, can be reversed if we start to live positively, if we start to go towards a low stress environment, if we start to shift things around, then somehow through epigenetics, we're able to stop the DNA from being activated in a certain way where we relive the previous generation's trauma. So also epigenetics point to our thoughts and our images and daily practices, such as visualization and meditation, being able to change the way our genes express. So later on, you'll see that Wolynn does introduce a lot of visualization exercises to help us heal and reconcile with the family or the inherited traumas. The family mind. So when mother carries inherited trauma or has experienced break and bond with her mother, it can interrupt her bond with her infant. So, for example, extended hospital stay or ill-time vacation when the baby's still young, or some type of reason why there has to be a long-term separation from the baby. And separation from the mother can feel life-threatening to the infant. If the separation continues for a prolonged period, the baby just gives up. The effects can remain as somatic memories because babies don't really have the declarative memories, as in memories that can be categorized, can be filed and stored systematically for retrieval later in word sentences, but they are just non-declarative memory that is in images or that is in feeling tones that's stored in the body in the cells, only to be triggered by later events of rejection or abandonment. And for those who are interested, another amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score, which talks about somatic memory, somatic stress, and how the body can tell you where or how you may still have memories of trauma, where the body stores the memories of trauma that may not be stored in declarative memories in the mind. So for those interested, another great book. Bert Hellinger, renowned German psychologist, teaches that we share a family consciousness with our biological family who come before us. So traumatic events can leave imprint on the entire family system for generation. So, events can include premature death of parents, death of anyone in the family, abandonment, crime, suicide. They can leave imprint on the entire family system for generations. And he also teaches that everyone has the same right to belong in a family system. Doesn't matter what they've done in their life, good or bad. Someone rejected or left out of the family system can become represented by a later member in the system without their conscious knowing. So, example, if your grandfather is rejected in the family because of his drinking, gambling, philandering, or doing something bad, it's possible that one or more of these behaviors will be adopted by one of his descendants. And the family suffering will continue into subsequent generations without our conscious awareness. And Hellinger uses the word entanglement to describe unconsciously carrying the behaviors, feelings, symptoms, hardship of earlier members as if it's their own. Let's process this for a minute. Coffee sip. This really means that there's certain behaviors and beliefs that we just assume is our own, that's who we are. I've been carrying this, let's say, belief A. I've been carrying this behavior B. I've been feeling emotion C all my life, and I just assume it's mine, it's who I am, it's who I'm supposed to be. But according to Hellinger, it could be the remnants, it could be an inheritance from many generations back within the family system, because that family member was somehow rejected or left out. So in order for the family system to remember the person who was rejected, the family member who was rejected, later generations would start to carry the same traits the same storyline, the same beliefs, the same emotions as the ancestor that was rejected. And we would just assume it's our fault. How crazy is that? So just marinate in this for a while. It's, to me, this is revolutionary. So because what Hellinger calls unconscious loyalty, it can cause repetition and suffering. Another example, the daughter marries a man who is emotionally unavailable and controlling. And by doing so, she shares this dynamic with her mother, who also married an emotionally unavailable and controlling man, her father. I bet that even if we're not a daughter in this situation, or chances are we've seen somebody somewhere in society, in our community, where we're just like, why did that person marry someone who is unavailable and controlling? And if we start to dig in their family history, um, we probably start to see the pattern and repetition in their history. And strong and successful early bonds with mother and father can immunize children from inheriting family trauma. Self-awareness, ability to self-soothe, and having powerful internal healing experiences can also help. We do the best we can. What I love about family constellation is that they teach that everybody belongs. So that even if your mother and father was not aware of these hidden family traumas, inherent traumas, repeated cycles, we're not here to blame them. We're here to accept, to see that they have really done the best that they could, and that we have the agency to be able to resolve this within us, to find that connectedness, to reconnect to the family system, to reconnect to our fathers and mothers in a healing, heartful way. I know, because I've gone through the gamut. I've done this work myself, and I started in 2019, and I've just hit a crescendo. That's why I feel confident enough to do this material now. But I know that my process is still ongoing. But suffice to say, my point is, it's easy to blame our parents. And through this work, you're going to find it very easily to find faults. But I want to remind everyone that the point is to be able to, again, embrace our mothers and fathers, and to hold them very lovingly in our hearts. And we're going to go through a journey with that. And again, we have the agency to come to practice self-awareness, to be able to self-soothe. We now have the technology to do it. We have experts, professionals, people like Mark Wolynn, who has the ability to put the information together, to package them in such a way where it's practical, where it is digestible, where we could actually set things into motion for ourselves to heal. Take advantage of these times. It's very exciting. So visualizations, guided imageries can help lower stress, reduce anxiety, boost performance, and help with fears and phobias. And you'll see that Wolynn will start to give a lot of practices for us to start releasing the emotions, releasing the beliefs. Neurons that fire together wire together. It's a phrase coined by Donald Hebb, a neuropsychologist in 1949. And this it suggests repetition can help establish new thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Norman Doidge, psychiatrist, says visualization, remembering, or imagining pleasant experiences activates many of the same sensory, motor, emotional, and cognitive circuits that fire during the real pleasant experience. So as we go through I think it's part 3, as we go through the healing exercises, the healing sentences, we'll be putting this into use, being able to visualize pleasant experiences with either a traumatic event or the person who was involved, be able to project, having sort of a reconciliation with them, a reconnection with them, and that really helps. So filling our minds with positive images of well-being can produce an epigenetic environment that reinforces the healing process. Quote by Dr. Dawson Church, again, same thing. And meditators, after only 8 hours of meditation, experience clear genetic and molecular changes, including decreased levels of pro-inflammatory genes, allowing them to recover from stressful situations more quickly. So, another PSA for meditation. We all know the benefits of meditation by now. It's been proven scientifically. Monks have done so many scientific research projects with renowned researchers for us to be able to say, yeah, there are distinct, marked benefits to meditation. And those benefits are not only psychological, they're also somatic and physiological. A life devoid without trauma is unlikely. Traumas don't sleep. The script just keeps running. Even in death, it continues to look for fertile grounds in the offsprings to seek resolution. So inherited trauma is not personal. I think the overall idea, at least the way that I'm seeing it in my head, the overall idea of the traumas being inherited through the generations is that so that we could really digest the traumas properly, so that we get to learn from it and become even stronger from it. So the good news is, well, you can't change your DNA. You can change the way your DNA functions. And it's sort of the same thing. So going back to epigenetics, going back to being able to visualize, practice the positive, the healing images, and being able to link the positive images back to the source of the trauma. That's what makes this really effective. If we're just doing positive images and positive visualizations, that's why sometimes we do affirmations after affirmations, positive, let's say positive imagery, hypnosis, or modalities like that, and it hasn't been working. Why? Because we haven't linked this back to the trauma of origin, or the ancestor of origin, or to the source of the issue. We haven't recognized it. We haven't allowed the subconscious and the unconscious to surface up to the conscious. So we need to link this conscious work with what has been lying beneath the traumas the inherited family cycles that's been cycling in the unconscious and the subconscious. And when those two are able to link together, that's when the healing happens. That's when visualization, positive psychology work can really start to take off. Okay, so the core language approach. So we'll start to see terms that are coined by Wolynn, and we'll go through them to set things up for part 2 and part 3. So core language, it's a verbal expression of inherited traumas. It can also be nonverbal, physical sensations, behaviors, emotions, impulses, or symptoms of illness. Traumatic experiences are often stored as non-declarative memory. Remember, we're talking about declarative memory versus non-declarative memory. It's also called implicit, sensory motor, or procedural memory that operates without conscious recall. They become instincts, like riding a bicycle. They're impulses and instincts. Versus declarative memory, which is, the tip of iceberg, the parts that we're able to see, that we're able to file in our memory system in a very systematic way for easy retrieval. That's explicit narrative memory that we can recall as facts and events. When memory function is inhibited during traumatic episode, emotionally significant information bypasses the frontal lobes and cannot be named or ordered through words or language. And this is by Bessel van der Kolk. Again, The Body Keeps Score, the book that I talked about before. So when there is trauma, when we were babies, of course, we would not be able to name the trauma, to label the trauma, to put it into words. So they bypass the prefrontal cortex, where we are able to process information logically, and they get stored as emotions. They get stored as emotional information instead of words. And even in adulthood, when we experience trauma that's so traumatic, we get cut off. We're just in reaction. We're cut off from our the frontal lobes, PFC, and we cannot process that traumatic events again in terms of declarative memory. Then it gets stored as emotions as well. The unconscious insists, repeats, and practically breaks down the door to be heard. Listen to the unsayable, which is in speech, enactments, dreams, and in the body, quote by Annie Rogers, psychologist. So we're really just diving into that non-declarative memory where trauma is stored as emotional memory. And then it becomes impulses. It becomes a reflex when triggered, and we're not even conscious of these reflexes. So we're going to be practicing being aware of what those reflexes are. What are we saying to ourselves? What is repeating in our experiences? And we learn to listen in compassionate awareness. And we learn to listen to what the body is telling us in compassionate awareness. So emotionally charged words are keys to non-declarative memories that live in our bodies, in the body of our family system. Core language help us to clear the memories that have gone undeclared. So we begin to form and understand a story that haunt our lives. Once located and understood, we can stop living the stories as though they belong in the present. So really exploring the unconscious, giving words and language, giving sentence structure to the unconscious, to the patterns that are repeating, to the trauma, so that we can start to process it. We can recognize our core language through urgent words that describe our deepest fears. Once the idiosyncratic language is exposed, the intensity and influence begins to lose its charge. So there typically is a sense of urgency and inevitability in these phrases that we say over and over to ourselves. Sometimes not even words. So we might need to evoke the feeling and then consciously assign a sentence to it, but we'll go through that in part 2. A map of the unconscious, or core language map, as phrased by Wolynn, can help us identify unresolved traumas and help us heal. So let me just see. So we'll talk about what the core language map is later on, and we'll pretty much be mapping this out in part 2. So don't worry about it if you're like, you don't know what this is. It's just used by Wolynn, and by the end of it, you'll have a clear sense of what this is. So chapter 5, the 4 unconscious themes. The 4 unconscious themes that interrupt the flow of life are: 1, we have merged with the parent. Let's pay attention, everybody. And this is really important. So 4 themes that interrupt the flow of life, that affect how we do things consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, that affect our quality of life, most likely unconsciously. So 1, we have merged with a parent. Number 2, we have rejected a parent. Number 3, we have experienced a break in the early bond with our mother. Number 4, we have identified with a member of our family system other than our parents. How many have you checked off so far? We delude ourselves in believing we can make our lives go as planned when we inherit family trauma through unconscious loyalty, parents' emotions while in the womb, early relationship with the mother, or epigenetic changes. That's an interesting sentence that I wrote down. So what I'm saying is that we think that, you know, these 4 themes have nothing to do with our willpower. You know, if there's a will, there's a way we can power through this. We can outsmart our body. We can outsmart these early childhood challenges, and we don't have to mind them at all. Let me just bury them and I don't have to look at them. All I need is a good old American, yes, we can spirit, and we can just trailblaze, we can pioneer, we do whatever we want, and we'll be successful, and everything will go as planned. And we're saying when there's inherited trauma and there's unconscious loyalty, it's going to be difficult for us to willpower through the subconscious and unconscious impulses. That's what I'm trying to say with this sentence. And when our connection with our parents flow freely, we experience ourselves as more open to receiving what life brings our way. When our connection with our parents is impaired in some way, the life force available to us can feel limited. Then we suffer and we can't pinpoint why. So it could be that you were given all sorts of resources that you would ever want. Maybe you, let's just say, were right smack in the middle of the societal echelon, grew up middle class, nothing is wrong, just normal education. And yet when you hit, let's say, uh, just your professional, when you start to rise in professional career, you find that you somehow self-sabotage your own success. And no matter what you do, how many Tony Robbins video you viewed, and how many self-help videos on YouTube you viewed, and how many different teachers of manifestation you followed, you could never get to that success. For some reason, it's like a rubber band. It will always catapult you back to a sense of not being as successful. So that's when you know that your connection with your parents, or your connection with the family system, has been impaired or not flowing as much. Can I say that? I just mean there's something going on in the family system where there is a belief there that says you cannot be unlimited success. You can't be an unlimited success. Like there is a cap somewhere. It's like there's a glass ceiling that's being set by the family system. And then you wouldn't be able to pinpoint why. And you think it's you. So we're going to break it down, go through these 4 unconscious themes. So 1, very carefully. So reflect on these questions as we go. Did you merge with the feelings, behaviors, or experience of a parent? So the questions to ask as an exploration, again, bring in some sort of sense of curiosity to this. Did one of your parents struggle emotionally, physically, or psychologically? Did it hurt you to see them suffer? Did you want to take their pain away? Did you try? Did you ever side with the feelings of one parent against the other? Were you afraid to show your love to one parent for fear of hurting the other? In your life today, do you struggle in a way similar to how your parents struggled? Do you recognize your parents' pain in you? So, Wolynn gives a lot of examples in the book. Another reason to actually read and get the book is that he gives a lot of examples so that you're not at a loss to what exactly he's talking about. And the example he gave regarding merging with a parent is someone going through a loser experience. And that person was making rash financial decisions that cost the family savings. And similar to how their father, or I think it's a he in the example, how his father lost his family's entire savings at the racetracks and became a loser in the family. So definitely go to the book to read that example. But see if you identify with any of these questions. And then number 2, rejecting a parent. Have you judged, blamed, rejected, or cut yourself off from a parent? So the questions to reflect would be, do you reject, blame, or judge a parent for something you feel he or she has done to you? Do you disrespect one or both of your parents? No shame and blame, please. Just notice. Let's do this in a spirit of discovery and exploration. Have you cut yourself off from either of them? So the emotions, traits, and behaviors we reject in our parents will likely live on in us. And we see that all the time. Like the more we reject a certain trait in our parents, like I know I'm not a parent, so I can't say this from a personal experience, but I know that there are parents who, once they see how their kids react to them, they suddenly realize, you know, why their own parents, or why they reacted the same way with their parents and vice versa, why their parents did the things that they did to them when they were kids. So it's like, oh, I really didn't like my dad scolding me when I got a B in tests, and I really rejected my parent because of it. So what Wallen is saying, that it's going to be more than likely that when your kid gets a B in their test, you're going to scold them just like your father did. That's if you rejected that parent or judged or blamed because they scolded you for getting a B. So we can also attract friends, romantic partners, or business associates who display the very behaviors we reject, allowing us opportunities to recognize and heal the dynamic. Again, it's really about healing the dynamic, but I just want to stress, notice, it's not only affecting how you operate in your own family system, this affects how you attract friends, romantic partners, and how you function in a business setting. How we do one thing is how we do everything. The implications are tremendous. It's tremendous. So another example from Wolynn in the book, again, highly recommend you just read this in the book. Dating partners who are always cold and distant, because their mother was cold and distant, because the grandmother had to go live with her aunt when small after her mother's death. So she felt like an outsider. So that person always ended up dating people who are cold and distant, just like her mother who rejected her. And her mother also rejected the grandmother for having died so young, or I don't think it was a rejection. It was because she was disconnected from the grandmother, so that this sense of judgment or this sense of blame carried on in the family system. So read that example. Then number 3, did you experience an interruption in the early bond with your mother? Consider the following. Does something happen while your mother was pregnant with you? Was she highly anxious, depressed, or stressed? Did she have postpartum depression? Did you experience a difficult birth? Was your birth difficult? Were you born premature? Were you adopted? Did you experience a trauma or separation from your mother during the first 3 years of life? And there are more questions in the book for you to go through. Was there a disconnection in how she touched us, in the way she looked at us, in the tone of her voice when she spoke? Do I experience difficulty bonding in a relationship? Do I shut down, pull away, push away from closeness? So the example in the book, as the mother returned home early from the hospital after giving birth to this person to care for their younger siblings, leaving them in the hospital with pneumonia. And then they found themselves shutting down and rejecting the mother. And then later on, they notice that they're not physically affectionate with their partner. So reflect on that. And then number 4, are you unconsciously identified with a member of your family system other than your parents? So do you feel like, behave like, suffer like, atone for, or carry the grief for someone who came before you? Do you have symptoms, feelings, or behavior that are difficult to explain in the context of your life experience? Did guilt or pain prevent a family member from loving someone or grieving? Did someone do something that caused their rejection in the family? Was there trauma in the family? Maybe events too painful, shameful to talk about. Could you be reliving their trauma as though it were your own? So the example in the book is someone suddenly started feeling numb towards their partner. And then they find out that their grandmother's husband was suddenly drowned when um, when they were young, and the grandmother raised your mother alone in loss and grief. And then realizing this, their feelings for their partner returns. So in this case, this person started to have unconscious loyalty towards the grandfather. who suddenly became absent from the family system. And that's why she became numb towards the partner. She couldn't continue on. But once you realize this, she's able to come back to her conscious intentions and not be identified with the subconscious impulses. Okay, so now we move on to the core language map, and this is the last slide for part 1. In part 2, we're gonna look at the 4 tools of the core language map to start mapping out the core trauma. So 1 is the core complaint, 2, the core descriptors, 3, the core sentence, and 4, the core trauma. And in part 2, we'll go over what Wolynn calls the core language map to begin parsing out the unconscious themes that we just went over, to be able to fish out those unconscious themes, to be able to put language and sentences to them so that we could set up a framework through which we can begin the healing work. So, oh my God, my spelling's been horrible. So get pen and paper or whatever writing tools for part 2, because you're gonna need to do exercises, or Wolynn will start to give us exercises. Or feel free to just go along with the presentation and use it in whatever way that suits you. So just to let you know, a lot of exercises are coming up, and feel free to follow along. Okay. Okay, great. So that's part 1 end. And I will stop the recording for now, and I'll see you in part 2. Namaste.